And I hope every single person listening pays attention to this one key point. You gotta have time to play. And I don't care how old you are. You need to find ways to play things that bring you joy and happiness just for the sake of joy and happiness. So, for example, things that really fill that, and I do these practices, some form of these every single day. For me, the practice of Tai Chi brings balance to my body, mind, and spirit, and that's very joyful for me. Riding my motorcycle in the mountains of Colorado is another form of incredible joy for me. Taking a walk around the block with the idea of, I want to see something I've never seen before. I program my mind, and inevitably, I see something I've never seen before, even though I've walked around my block hundreds of times, right? I pay attention to those little things. And here's the really impressive part of all that. The Buddhists have a saying. It's called let your mud settle. So you imagine taking a big jar, you go down to a river, you scoop a big thing of water, and it's all stirred up, and you set that jar down, come back a couple hours later, the mud is settled, and the water is now crystal clear. Find activities that allow your mud to settle, that are replenishing your soul, and do it in equal measure to the challenges that you have.
Welcome to the Wisdom We Share podcast, where ancient truths and modern intelligence weave together to inspire, ground, and shape us for a wiser, awakened life. I'm Anjani Amrit.
And I'm Robin Wald. And together we bring you fascinating conversations from the worlds of spirituality, science, and human behavior, so you can connect to your own inner wisdom, joy, and clarity, elevating the way you actually live your life. All right, so today we have with us Rodger Ruge. Rodger, so happy to have you on the show today. And I know that you have so much wisdom to share with people, so I just can't wait to get in there with you. Rodger and I, for everybody, we we met through someone else, and we met for an astrology consult, right, to begin with. But you and I always really clicked and vibed, and I always saw you as, wow, this person is so special. Like, I know I'm offering you some astrology, but you had so much wisdom and awareness and integration to offer me. So it's always been an honor, to connect with you whenever we have. So thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you, Robin. And, along those lines, I think it's kind of important to point out sometimes we come to a place of wisdom and people tend to go, oh, well, you're on this pedestal. You're over here. You've like transitioned past all the stuff that life has to throw at us. And it's like, oh no, time out. The people that really are true seekers always have people in their life that add to them, that add to their collective, that when you struggle, you have someone to reach out to. This is so, so important. And I count you amongst that very small circle of friends who can offer me guidance in a different way for me to say, how do I feel about that? And if I embrace that, how do I want to move forward from there? Because we have our own box, no matter how big that box is. So I always appreciate you stretching and nudging that box.
that's great. Thank you for saying that, because I also consider you part of that community, right? We all have people who help expand us, expand our consciousness, expand our wisdom, expand our perspective, right? Help us see things from a different perspective, or remind us of what we knew but haven't been practicing. And I think that that's a big part of what we're trying to do with this podcast. And, Anjani also super connected and spiritual in that way. And we're trying to form a community of listeners, of people who we're there for each other, right? It's all about community, which is great. So I'm going to read your bio just so people kind of officially know who you are. And then let's jump into this amazing interview. So Rodger Ruge is a certified resilience coach working with the first responder community to create cultural change and cultivate peaceful warriors. Rodger, a lifelong learner, has studied meditation with monks and monastics, shamanism with Native Americans, and subtle energy enhancement with Qigong and martial arts masters for over 30 years. The author of 4 books and counting, Rodger is excited to continue his life journey, instilling hope, positivity, and inspiration into every life he touches. So thank you for that, Rodger. So I want to dive in because you call yourself a resilience coach, and I would love for you to define that for us. To you, what is resilience?
Yeah, I love that question. It really, it's something that we've kind of gotten into a bit of a buzzword around lately, this idea of resilience. And you hear it everywhere and in every possible context once the media latches on to something. And we think often that it's the ability to bounce back from adversity and get back to where homeostasis is. But that's really just a fractional part of resilience. To me, resilience is also the opportunity to grow.
Mm.
So, yeah, we can get through something, survive it, and get back to our known day to day. That's certainly a aspect of resilience. But to me, many people miss the opportunity that adversity brings, which is a way for us to grow, to expand, to share, to gain wisdom. And so for me as a resilience coach, not only do I want people who are in a low state of resilience to get their mojo back, so to speak, I want them to then say, and now can I up level from that place? And then the pinnacle of resilience to me is where you look forward to the challenges that come into your life because you know they offer you that opportunity to take another step. And if you can get there, very few things in life are going to knock you down and take you out. You're going to have the ability to move through them with so much more ease and grace when you embrace them as a gift.
So, Rodger, you've had a long career in law enforcement. And looking back now, how would you say from now that shaped your understanding of resilience, inner resilience, growing through experiences? How would you say that shaped or informed you, having that experience yourself in your life?
You know, that's a really great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, actually. And there was a moment where I had an epiphany as a young officer. So I only had about 4, maybe 5 years on. You're still kind of in the rookie realm at that point. And there was a really bad gang fight in one of my beat in my zone. And so I responded to that and I met a young man who was down. He'd been stabbed 7 times in the chest. 3 of those wounds were what we call a sucking chest wound, where they had punctured the lungs. I put my hands on those just to get him stable enough for paramedics to arrive. And he's one of our known gang members in the community. He's been a real problem for us. I'm attempting to save his life. And when I put my hands on those wounds, I got his airflow to go back into the lungs. He regains consciousness and starts to fight me. And so we get that squared away. The paramedics come, they transport him to the hospital, and they save his life. A week later, I'm driving through this section of our community. It's a pretty rough area. It's a low-income housing, high density. And there he is. He sees me. It's only been 7 days. He takes his shirt off. He still has stitches all over his body. Remember, 2 collapsed lungs. He gets down on the ground, starts doing push-ups, and then hops up and gives me one of these, a little nod with the head, right? I'm like, okay, that's really interesting because I'm noticing police officers with non-life-threatening wounds dying. What's the difference? And I thought it is this mindset of resilience that they possess. So in law enforcement, we do a pretty good job of training the body, but not a really good job of training the mind. If you're on a SWAT team, yeah, you get that extra training, but the average day-to-day officer really doesn't get it. And so I saw a gap, and that gap it sparked me to write my first book called The Warrior's Mantra. which was the idea to begin to train the mind to become more resilient. Now, that was over 30 years ago at this point. But the reason that that was important was it kind of jump-started me down this path of what is real resilience and how far can we expand it. So I started with this idea of survival back to homeostasis, but then I saw in my own journey as well, there was so much more available, and that's what led me down the road.
And with that, the training of the mind, if you were to pick one thing, because I really love your book about the warrior's mantra. If you were, out of everything that you know and all the wisdom that you had, were to share just one way or one tool or one mantra to share with our audience as a piece of wisdom for them to train their mind to maybe be that tough, like that guy that you came across, what could they do, that's something simple that they could do every day for themselves?
So the one thing I could say, and I could say about 1,000, but the one thing I would say is take a martial art.
Mm.
And the reason that I suggest this, I think everyone should study martial arts because you gain the confidence of having to face conflict. You will be facing conflict. You're going to spar with people, which is a form of controlled fighting. And the more you gain skill in that, the more you become more resilient to letting go of fear and standing in confidence. One of the things that if you find a really ethical martial arts teacher, they're going to help you become so confident that when an adversary comes to you, you give them nothing. You don't give them aggression, nor do you give them fear. You just simply stand in your power. And I can tell you that the vast majority of the time, there will be no conflict because the person looking for a fight is looking for one of two reactions from you. They're looking for fear or they're looking for aggression. When you just stand confidently with a smile on your face, not mocking, by the way, but just calm and centered, they have no idea what to do. I've encountered this many times, and I used this as a police officer where I just stayed in completely neutral. In other words, I'm not afraid of you, nor am I a threat to you, but we have to work this out.
Yeah,
And
I heard
that was it.
recently. I love that. I heard actually recently that um, people who are perpetrators can tell from miles away who are victims, who have victim consciousness, who are scared, like dogs can kind of smell fear. And so yeah, I think that's some lovely wisdom that, do a martial art. I actually did Kung Fu when I was little. My brother was into it. We loved Bruce Lee. And then I did Tai Chi Chuan later, which is the art of fighting without fighting. I loved it. And it brought me a lot of confidence. I was overweight as a kid. I got picked on a lot. So I relate to that. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, really think about your children as well. There's so much bullying happening and all the things that are taking place. Both of my daughters, I put them into martial arts. They got to choose what they wanted to do. And I had a wonderful ethical teacher who gave them life lessons and all of that. They're now young women who are completely confident, completely confident. They do not walk in the shadow of fear as a result of that.
I
Yeah.
love that. As someone who teaches kids, I teach from fifth graders all the way through teenagers. And as a parent, right? Both of my boys did martial arts. My daughter never really was interested. She did gymnastics and other things, but I could see how the martial arts training really does ground you in a sense of I have some control, right? I can control my body, I can control my mind, and the connection of that, both the emotional, mental control and the physical discipline is really key. And when I teach kids, there is a lot of bullying or perceived, they're teasing me, and how does someone kind of present in a way of like whatever they're saying or doing, I can hold true to myself and feel solid and feel confident is a really important skill for kids. So I
It,
love that you're bringing this up for adults, for anyone, right? We all need training in this. So what does your martial arts practice look like now? And has that evolved over time?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, I too started out with a form of Kung Fu. It was actually Bruce Lee's root art, which is called Wing Chun.
That's
And
what
Wing
I
Chun
did.
was,
Oh my God,
yeah,
I did that.
exactly. And Wing Chun is perfect for police officers because when we get into a physical encounter with someone, it's usually when we go to put hands on them and put a set of handcuffs on. That's usually when it goes bad, which means I don't have access to any of the tools on my belt. I have to be able to use my hands to control someone. And Wing Chun is called infighting, Chinese boxing or infighting. So you're really up close and personal. I realized I had a gap in my game as a police officer, so I studied Wing Chun for that very specific purpose. And then from there, I wanted to expand. So I've studied a number of different martial arts systems, everything from jujitsu to Russian sistema to Krav Maga. I've studied a bunch of different systems. And where I am now in the afternoon of my life, I am returning to actually one of the arts I studied 20 years ago, which is Tai Chi. And this is specifically from the Yang lineage of Chen Manchang. And what I find that's beautiful about this is more of an internal system. And so while it is a martial art, as my body is aging, I want that aging to happen as gracefully as I can. And with Tai Chi, it is as healing as it is martial. And so I find here that kind of middle point, which gives me a wonderful experience. And I'm always up leveled every time I leave that class.
Hmm. Thank you for that. You talk about mantras and pairing those with breathing techniques. So how did these practices for you, how do they work together? And how can someone who's never practiced anything like that, how can they start to integrate them into their daily life without kind of feeling overwhelmed? So how do you pair mantras and breathing, and how might you suggest or recommend someone start who's never done anything like that before?
Really, really challenging situation for people is the overabundance of information in this regard. There's so much out there. People always ask me, Rodger, what's the best martial art to study? What's the best breath work to study? What's the best mantra to do every day? My response is always this, the one you'll do.
Mm.
And so it really requires you to take a little bit of a journey into developing yourself and experimenting until you find the one. For example, if someone says to me, Rodger, I want to study a martial art, I say, visit every dojo in your community, visit them all. And you'll walk into one and go, this is it. And that's where you begin. When it comes to breath work, there are so many ways to utilize breath work. If you want to take a little bit of a journey into exploring that, I recommend a book called The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McKeown, McKeown. This man has literally dedicated his entire life to how breath work can enhance us in every possible way. And there are many, many practices within that. Then, as far as a mantra, you want to think about, well, what is it I would like to enhance within myself? And then you choose some words or semantics to go with that. Now, to give your listeners an idea of where this might begin, I think one of the best breathwork practices is a very simple inhale and exhale through the nose in a relaxed body posture. And what we're doing is breathing light, slow, and deep. So I'm giving your listeners permission to do some LSD. Light, slow, deep breathing. And we want to fill the lungs from the bottom up. On the inhale, we want to inhale for about 4 seconds, somewhere in that ballpark, 4 to 5 seconds. Don't get obsessed over the time, just ballpark it. The key is then we want to exhale longer than the inhale, maybe 5 to 6 seconds. It only has to be just a little bit longer. When we do that, we're now invoking our parasympathetic nervous system to come online. In other words, we're pumping the brakes. We're down-regulating our hyperness in the world. Mm. And so as we're inhaling, we fill the lungs from the bottom up. We do this light, slow, deep breathing, 4 to 5 seconds on the inhale, 5 to 6 seconds on the exhale. That, just as a basic breath work, is amazing. You could dedicate your entire life and never find the end of that practice. So that's a really good one. Now, as far as the mantra goes, maybe you're feeling really, really stressed in your life, and you want to help your mind wrap around something opposite of that. Here's a simple way to choose a single word for the inhale and a single word for the exhale. So for example, if I want to calm myself down, I might say on the inhale, peace, and on the exhale, serenity. Or I might say happiness, joy, love, friendship. A single word mantra associated with that breath work that's a positive affirmation, and you can tailor that to any need you have. And that's a very simple but effective, don't let simple fool you, way to shift your brain's consciousness and get that body, mind, and spirit coming into alignment. And I promise you, if you stay with that as a steady practice, 3 minutes in the morning, first thing when you swing your feet onto the floor, 3 minutes. Then do it again before your midday meal. We don't want to have a full stomach when we try to do breath work. And then at the end of your workday, before you transition from work to home, for example, another 3 minutes. And then you could even fall asleep to it. Just lay down in bed and do another 3 minutes. What you're doing is keeping that parasympathetic response in the body engaged. And studies have shown that a solid 3-minute practice will keep you parasympathetic for up to 6 hours. That's a heck of a return for about 9 to 12 minutes of your day.
Yeah, that's a good ROI. I love that. I love that.
I love also the simplicity of this, right? Because what you said, there are 1,000 practices. There are so many martial arts. When people ask me about yoga, or they'll say, oh, I tried a yoga class once and I didn't like it, or I wasn't flexible. And I'm like, you need to experiment. Just what you said. There's so many paths, right? And there's a teaching, right? All paths lead to the one. All paths lead us home, right? So it really is about finding the path that is right for you. And I find that for a lot of my clients as well, the simplest path is often the best one because it's the one that you will consistently show up to do. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't require any special equipment. You don't need to be in any special place to do it. You could be waiting in the grocery checkout line to breathe with a mantra. Like you could take it with you. And it's when it's like that low-hanging fruit, it's so easy for us to pluck and eat, it's like the juicy. So I love that you just in real time just gave people very practical, like you can do this, and this is how you do it, and this is when you do it, and how often you do it, and this is the impact. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is so simple, and I'm really a fan of simple. Like we can make things complicated. That's fine. If that's your jam, go do that. Dive into something and get into the weeds with it. Cool. Good, good, good. But if simplicity is available for most people and most people are unwilling to take that deeper dive, let's go for the simple. And I get asked a lot, goes, well, what if this happens or that happens? I just say, breathe. Find a pause and breathe for 3 minutes. Let me give you an example. If I take a telephone call or I handle something heavy with a coaching client, as soon as I finish, I go right to 3 minutes. I reset myself. If I need more, I do more. You can't overdose on this technique, right? But the idea is I always am resetting. I live just outside of Denver, Colorado. If you've never driven in Denver, Colorado, it is aggression on steroids. And so I know that it's always going to be a really intense experience just to drive through Denver. I begin breathing at my home. I get into my car. I'm still breathing. and I breathe all the way to my destination and I'm completely zen in the madness. These are ways we can incorporate this into our life. We don't have to wait for the practice. We can engage and become the practice.
Yeah, I mean, it takes awareness to do that. I find, a lot of the teaching I do with clients is teaching them the awareness so that they're remembering to do that, because we get into this unconscious habits, these daily routines, we go on autopilot. Do you have any recommendations for people, like something really practical that will help them not get stuck in their daily routine and the daily fog of it, to help them stay really aware and to remember to do their practice, the 3 minutes, the 3 minutes, and the 3 minutes? Because it is a simple practice, but I find the hardest thing for people is actually remembering to do it in the midst of their day of doing.
It's an evolutionary process because my experience mirrors your own for sure. And when I'm working with a coaching client and we meet each week, one of the things that is of tremendous benefit to them is my holding them accountable to their declared practices. So my recommendation is that you do one of two things to help instill this as a habituated pattern. And that would be find a partner to do it with so that you are supporting each other, or make a declaration to someone who will hold you accountable. And if you do that, you're going to remember sooner than later, and then it'll just become how you live your life from that place. But it is truly an evolutionary process, especially when we're trying to break old habituated patterns, including many folks, I'm sure you see it too, who are addicted to the hormones of stress. What we're really doing is breaking a habituated pattern. That is not an easy thing to do. So I think we have to be very kind to ourselves and just continue with it. But a partner and someone holding you accountable is the best way I know.
Yeah, I love that. So as a coach, also accountability is one of the big, ways that I support people in succeeding at their stated goals and declarations. And then throughout my own life, I've had accountability partners for meditation practice, for morning prayer practice, for all kinds of things. Right now, I have a dream partner. Like when we have dreams, we, send them to each other and we listen and we respond, but it's a way that I also know, like, I'm gonna continue with my stated declaration that I'm really seeking to explore and understand my dreams and find meaning, right? So if you have a goal, having someone who knows about that goal versus having it in secret where you can sort of half-ass it and nobody's gonna know, right? Once it's like out loud and other people know, you have to kind of keep your word. It elevates your own integrity around that. Um,
Yes.
yeah, something about integrity that's really key in all of this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the word integrity because it's one of my personal checks and balances. And I ask myself this question quite often. Am I in integrity? You want to get really good at something, make a commitment to teach it.
Spoken like a true Gemini. So yes, Roger is not only has his sun in Gemini, you also have your Mercury in the 29th degree of Gemini. And for all my astrology newbies or whatever
In
level of
English,
practice.
Robin, in
English,
English.
I'm about to translate. The 29th degree of any sign is that very, very last degree, last minutes, last chance. There's an urgency. It's called the critical or anaretic degree, where it's like, I need to work this out, resolve this, master this in this lifetime. This ends here. This is like the final. And Mercury rules Gemini. Gemini is all about teaching. It's about learning, gathering in information, turning information into knowledge, turning knowledge into wisdom, teaching that back out to others. And here you are, you're speaking on these things, you're teaching these things, you're writing books on these things. You're so in your mission of everything I've learned and integrated. I know I have a legacy to leave to put that out. So tell us what you're working on in that sense. What are you teaching? Who are you teaching? If you're looking for a trusted, skillful expert to support your deeper work of self-exploration and evolution in your life, relationships, business, or spiritual growth, we invite you to reach out anytime.
This is the deeper work Robin and I love to do beyond the podcast. Impactful mentorship, coaching, spiritual guidance, astrology in a one-on-one setting. All the links are sitting right there for you in the show notes.
One of the biggest goals I've had in my life is nothing short of creating cultural change within the first response community. And this is a very, very resistant community to anything that is outside of a very tiny box. And so they refer to everything I do as woo-woo. And people have even jokingly now assigned me the title of Doctor of Woo-woo, which is, just a fun way to banter. These folks are wonderful. They have great banter. They love to tease each other. But at the end of the day, they're also curious seekers. And they really do want to up-level. And what I was doing was putting on classes, and I've taught at this point probably approaching 100,000 officers and firefighters and paramedics across the country. But what I saw was not a lot of behavioral change. And the reason was they were going back to the known. And in the known, anybody who practices these things against the larger population is practicing the woo-woo. And that's just they're a little afraid of that. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but at the end of the day, they tease about it. They don't take it seriously. And when you go back to the known, well, it's very hard to be that anomaly amongst your peers. Very difficult. So I got to thinking about this, and a few years ago, I partnered up with a lady, Dr. Renee Thornton. She's a former Navy rescue swimmer. She's an amazing humanist psychologist. We've written a couple of books together. And what we started last year was something called Leading High Performance Cultures. And now what we did, we interviewed 150 public safety agencies, and that was 911 telecommunications, paramedic EMS, firefighters, and police. We interviewed 150 of them, and we felt that 10 of those leaders, these are the top of the food chain, were well enough along and willing to embrace cultural change. And we brought them together in Michigan on a magical little place called Mackinac Island, where there are no cars. You can only get places by horse-drawn carriage. Life slows down. We took them out of their known, and they began a 5-year project. And the 5-year project is Dr. Thornton and I creating cultural change within the agency that embraces this idea of resilience. And so now what we have is a top-down model. So when the administration and the leadership embraces these things and then says, this is how we do business, now we're creating a literal departmental cultural change. And that's been the difference. This year, when we come back for year 2, the first-year group, a new first-year group is going to begin. Who is that new group? They were all handpicked by the existing cohort we have. This is how we're taking a kind of grassroots approach to create this through North America, because we've got folks from Canada and folks from the US in this project right now.
What change did you notice in that first group, Rodger? I'm fascinated about how were you able to make a shift in their mindset around it, and what was the biggest change or transformation you noticed with this first year group?
It's a super good question, because how do you decide who's going to fit that model, right? What we looked for in the interview was not perfection. We looked for a mind that was open to progress. And we looked for people who were okay being uncomfortable. Because let me tell you, we stretched these folks hard, and they definitely all hit their wall, every single one of them. It's not just the event on the island. We meet monthly. We have courses every week, and they are engaged in that process. So the key to it was who had an open mind and was willing to get uncomfortable in the way they've always done things. Because that's what we always hear. When you ask the question, why are we doing that? Their response is because we've always done it that way. We're not interested in that. We're interested in the leader who says, I want to have a true high-performing culture. I want the age of death for a police officer to stop being 57 years old. I want suicide to not be the number one leading cause of death in public safety. They're ready. And so they're ready to leave a lasting legacy and to be the model for that. That was the key for us, was that open mind and willingness to stretch.
It takes a lot of vulnerability to do that, and so I think, and that is an indicator of resilience. If you've got people who are able to be vulnerable in positions of leadership and say, okay, I'm willing to admit I don't know everything. I'm willing to admit that I need to change or up level or evolve. I'm willing and open to be vulnerable and share and say that I don't know and learn something new. And that to me is the epitome of resilience. It's the ability to be vulnerable. So it's interesting you found that in people.
It took a while to find them. Like I say, 150 interviews to get 10.
It's really interesting, the open-mindedness piece, right? I think people, when you ask most people, they would sort of say that they do have an open mind, but then their actions and behaviors don't necessarily really align with that, their self, assessment of that. So to have an open mind inherently involves some risk, because what you're risking is, oh, I could be wrong, or what I thought I knew and believed in, maybe I need to reevaluate that. Maybe there's a different truth that I wasn't understanding or considering. And I mean, if we all were able to keep an open mind, maybe the world would look a lot different and more nuanced in terms of how we understand very, very divisive, polarizing issues, where people take their sides and then they only follow the social media and the news of the side that agrees with them. So they're only always hearing the messages that they already believe. And the ability to have an open mind means listening to the opposite viewpoint, or a viewpoint you've never considered, and saying, what if that was true? Let me try that on a little bit, right? So it's very interesting that really is an indicator of someone who can grow, right? I think that's why I keep coming back to why I love children so much. I really do love teaching children. The beauty of teaching children is that they really do still have a natural open curiosity, and they know they will be the first ones to admit they don't know everything yet. They're still learning. And in that place of still learning, there's a curiosity of, yes, let me try these ideas on. Let me listen to what someone else says. Let me respond to that. So here's my thought for you, just to step away for a moment from the professional work you're doing. In your personal life, where are you kind of pushing your edge of getting out of the familiar and being open to something unfamiliar and taking risk around that?
So this is an interesting aspect of my life where I've always been a fan of doing something that challenges myself and makes me step into vulnerability. And when you think about my background, that's pretty oppositional because, when you're in law enforcement, you are supposed to be the line between order and chaos. You're supposed to know everything. And of course you don't, and that's what gets you into trouble. And I realized fairly early on that if I did things that challenged me in a relatively controlled environment where I felt at least safe enough, then I could begin to expand myself and not get pigeonholed into, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. When you're uncomfortable being uncomfortable, then when strange things come into your life that you haven't had any experience with, you're like, I can figure my way out of this because you've done it over and over. So, for example, one of the things that I wanted to do when I got divorced, my ex-wife was way okay with debt. It was just okay to max everything out as long as you could pay it. I didn't want to ever be in debt again. And I realized I needed a financial education. Like when you look at all the capital aspects of wellness, emotional, cognitive, psychological, those kind of things, I had no game in financial. Financial is an aspect of resilience and wellness. So I did something called Harv Eker, T. Harv Eker, The Millionaire Mind. And he had a workshop. It was a 3-day workshop. And I learned how to balance a budget, do all the stuff because I was now on my own. And I realized I never wanted to be in debt. I have not been in debt since.
Yeah.
That led me to, I wonder what else I could do to challenge myself. I think I'd like to go to something called the Warrior Camp. And I went to that and they really put it to me. And I did that because I had to physically retire from law enforcement at year 20 with a severe back injury. I wanted to say, well, I wonder what I can do because I sure am focused on what I can't. And then that taught me I had a lot more ability than I realized that I had limited myself to up here. So I'm always saying, okay, where's the gap? Where am I uncomfortable? And let me go do something that challenges that. That's just been my modus operandi for many years.
I think you're lucky to have that. And I know some people do. I want to ask you and kind of go back to what we were talking about a little while ago about PTSD and trauma, because I know you've had it. I've also had it growing up, from growing up in a domestic violent family. And so I do know from personal experience and from all the research that when we've had trauma of that severity, and it's way more people than we think, then it makes it so much more difficult for us to do something simple to change, because our safety lies in our habits. So what advice do you have for people like that, maybe from your own experience or, around trauma, and how can people kind of, deal with that or overcome that or move through that in a way that allows them to maybe have a more open mind or feel safe to go there?
If there's some topic you're curious about or an issue that maybe you're struggling with and seeking some insight and guidance around, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us either through our social links or on our web pages and pop us your questions so we can discuss them and offer some wisdom on an upcoming episode of the podcast.
Yeah, this is a very important question. And my simple answer is get professional guidance. You've got to have someone to help you unwind it. I ended up being diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. At the time, we called it a disorder. Now we're looking more at it like an injury. But the truth was I had experienced multiple traumas. To give you an example, a normal human might experience a trauma event a couple of times in their life, something that would literally rise to the level of trauma. A police officer firefighter in a 30-year career will experience 500 to 800 trauma level events. And then they wonder why they're de-evolving. In my opinion, when we are really starting to realize we may need some help with something, let the stigma go that reaching out for help reaching out for support and help is somehow weak. It's actually the greatest strength. And you can get someone to help guide you through the complexity of trauma. And it is complex. It takes a while to unwind that. So my answer and encouragement to everyone is seek professional guidance, and you will never regret the time you spend in that. It is well worth your time and energy and money.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I have to echo that as well. Me personally, I've had therapy, I've had counseling, I've had energy healing, and a combination of all of those really helped me become more resilient and able to deal with it, overcome it, move through it, and become more of who I really came here to be. So I think it's great advice. And also the advice around the stigma, because there's so much stigma, especially for men. Women, yes, but more so for men. There's so much stigma around asking for help. Like, I'm not a man if I go and ask for help. It's just not in their vocabulary. So how would you advise, what could you say to men who are listening to this, who are thinking, geez, that might be me, but I don't want to go and where do I start? Like how would I look for someone? Where would I even start? Because I think that's the hardest thing is starting that process, admitting it to yourself and possibly looking for some help.
Yeah, it is a really big challenge. And you want to talk about stigma. When this happened to me, I just want to give you a little relational thing to how big the stigma was.
Mm.
In my particular agency, we had something called the Employee Assistance Program, and that was access to a culturally competent psychologist. In other words, they worked with law enforcement firefighters, they understood us, and you could get 6 sessions with that psychologist anonymously. So that was a good thing, right? I didn't have to necessarily risk it. But the problem was the psychologist that we worked with was half a block from the police department. So I would literally park like 3 blocks away, wear a disguise, get to the front door, and run inside. I'm not kidding. So it was pretty bad. And, when we're looking for that, the first place I'm going to go is to online forums in my community where I can even be an avatar if I want. I don't have to use my name. And I'll begin searching. And then I might make several calls to people. And just like looking for that martial arts studio, I might go visit several until I find the one. But it really is up to you to take that first step. And I know you two deal with this too. As professional coaches, there is often a fairly fine line between coaching and therapy, but we are not therapists. So very often when someone rises to the level where I think they need a psychological intervention of some kind, I have a bunch of people in my back pocket in my community that I can refer them to. And
Yeah.
I have relationships with those people.
Yeah, and that's
So,
absolutely part of the ethics, right? Of
yes,
knowing what you're qualified to address with someone, right? Being an accountability partner, helping someone vision, purpose, and the path to get there and all of that, but really unpacking deep trauma and doing therapy around past issues and right, that's not so it's like knowing when to refer and that is again part of creating community, right?
yeah,
Like it takes a community to support people and their health and well-being and success. So, we're each part of that. I wanted to ask you switch tacks a little bit. Thank you for giving those resources. I don't know, first, Anjani, did you have any follow-up on that you wanted to address around resources for?
There are lots of resources. I think with the advent of AI also, it can be really helpful. So using like a chat GPT to ask, to recommend this is what I'm facing. And I would also recommend using AI prompts and questions to help start that process. So I use it a lot even today for myself and the people I work with. You can say things like, hey, I'm not doing too well. This is going on for me. What do you recommend? What can I do? And AI can be your first counselor, your first therapist, and you can just dip your toe in the water. So I would only have that to add. But yeah, I kind of echo what Roger said. There's still so much stigma around getting help. So possibly AI is going to help us in the future, starting that process.
Yeah. I also think stigma-wise, and Roger, you could, speak to this in your experience in terms of as someone who is working to change the culture and create evolution around that culture, as someone who works with young people, it's shifted. We've done a great job, at least in the Northeast in New York, in, a more maybe liberal setting education there's been a huge shift in consciousness to destigmatize mental health issues. I mean, these kids lived through COVID and loss of school and social connection and have the highest rates of anxiety and depression and drug use and all kinds of issues. And there have been really concerted efforts to destigmatize and connect kids to resources. And actually to the point where there aren't really enough good professional resources to meet the demand, right? So that's the flip side of it, right? Now we have an awareness of we need the help, but maybe there isn't even sufficient access to appointments to get the help we need. But have you noticed that changing in the hero community specifically, that there is a destigmatization?
Yeah, there certainly is. And several people have been really leading the charge that are influencers within the culture, right? On all sides of it. And so we're getting better and better at destigmatizing this idea that seeking help is weakness, because that's the bottom line of it all. That vulnerability piece you were speaking to earlier. I think that as people begin to realize that you can up level, right? Then we have the ability to say, I'm going to seek that. And when somebody of influence says, hey, I really struggled with this, and I went and got help, and now I'm here. We have so many people coming out now that are writing books and doing podcasts and going on lecture circuits and talking about the elephant in the room. I really do see it changing. And I know it changes when we begin to reject the idea of post-traumatic stress as a disorder. There's now a huge movement to call it an injury, and that in fact, you can heal yourself from this injury. And when we start to think of it that way, how much better are we at allowing that to not be a stigma?
Yeah.
And I know in a lot of training areas where new people are coming in and they're going to academies, I remember when I went through the academy in 1985, we had a 2-hour block on mental health. That was it. Now, it's a huge part of the curriculum. And this idea of seeing someone who is a professional, culturally competent is what you do. And I was really encouraged. I was speaking to a sergeant from the Ventura, California Police Department, and she's in the middle of her career. So she's got some old school folks and some new school folks. And she said, Rodger, it's really, really amazing. We may have a really heavy call, and some of the new folks will come up to me and say, hey, Sarge, that was a little rough. Do you mind if I give a quick call over to EAP? I think I need to talk this one out. And so we're beginning to see generationally, it's much more acceptable to do this in the generations coming into the career now.
Yeah.
And so I love that, right? I love that because we're now beginning to break it. I think we're really one generation away from it becoming okay to do.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So here's my final question that we love to ask people what they're playing at in their lives. Like, what are you doing for fun? What fills your cup? What lights you up? But in light of this conversation, also, not only what are you doing, but how does that kind of feed back into your own resilience?
It's a wonderful question. And I hope every single person listening pays attention to this one key point. You gotta have time to play. And I don't care how old you are. You need to find ways to play things that bring you joy and happiness just for the sake of joy and happiness. So for example, things that really fill that, and I do these practices, some form of these every single day. For me, the practice of Tai Chi brings balance to my body, mind, and spirit, and that's very joyful for me. Riding my motorcycle in the mountains of Colorado is another form of incredible joy for me. Taking a walk around the block with the idea of, I want to see something I've never seen before. I program my mind, and inevitably I see something I've never seen before, even though I've walked around my block hundreds of times, right? I pay attention to those little things. And here's the really impressive part of all that. The Buddhists have a saying. It's called let your mud settle. So you imagine taking a big jar, you go down to a river, you scoop a big thing of water, and it's all stirred up, and you set that jar down, come back a couple hours later, the mud is settled, and the water is now crystal clear. Find activities that allow your mud to settle, that are replenishing your soul, and do it in equal measure to the challenges that you have. If you can walk the middle way, then your pendulum isn't swinging between these extremes. And this is what I like to do. Some people might call this boring. I call it a beautiful life.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Anjani, do you have any other thoughts or questions for Rodger?
Yeah, just one. What gives you hope after all that you've witnessed in your life?
That's a very powerful question. I'm going to answer it this way. I read a book that completely changed my life just a few years ago, and it was called Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton.
I just finished reading that book. I just returned it to the library this week. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're talking about this.
And what I came to from that and many other teachings that I've had, I've worked with so many amazing, beautiful, masterful teachers. I've really been blessed. What gives me hope is that I believe, and this will sound a little counterintuitive, that everything is exactly perfect. And that if I can let go of my judgment, I realize that everyone, regardless of the circumstances, is getting exactly what they came here to learn. And that is not always easy. I know that I've had my own share of adversities, but I can look back on my life and go, every single one of them was a value add to my life, which means any adversity that comes to me now is a value add to my life. That's how I see the adversity. I used to resist it, hide from it, run from it, avoid it, do maladaptive coping mechanisms to get away from it. Now, I literally look at it and I say, good, I got this.
That's a real wisdom drop. Thank you so much, Rodger. And thank you for joining us on this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure to eke out all of the wisdom that you have, and clearly you have lots more. So thank you for your time and presence here today, and we will hopefully get you back on and get some more wisdom out of you. Thank you so much.
If people want to reach out to you, if they want to find your books or any of your teachings, or want to reach out to connect with you as a resilience coach, how do they find you?
You just type my name into the search bar and I will pop up. My name is spelled very strange. So Rodger is with a D, Rodger, and the last name is Ruge, Ruge. Just put that in a search bar, you'll find me.
Amazing. Rodger, thank you so much for joining us today. It was amazing.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Truly, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Wisdom We Share podcast. We hope today's episode sparked some new insight, imagination, and practical tools you can integrate into your daily life.
Continue this journey with us by subscribing, sharing, and dropping us a review. Until next time, stay wise.